Hey, Teddy K here for the Best Buy blog, and in this video review we take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S21 Plus and Galaxy S21, two of Samsung's latest smartphones that look different but bear a strong resemblance to the past. If you're coming from the Galaxy S20 phones, these two are going to feel like familiar territory to you because Samsung didn't change a great deal on the inside, but certainly did on the outside. And that is one of the most striking things initially about these two phones is the design. So it seems to me like Samsung tries things from a design perspective and then after a year or two kind of figures out that it can go a different route and then actually comes up with something compelling. Now, the design with these two is not entirely different. We saw this with the Galaxy Note 20, so you have this kind of matte back finish. It's a glass finish, although on the S20 it's Glastic. Here it's Gorilla Glass Victus. Either way, the point is that you have this like kind of matte finish. It's easier to touch and it looks nice, but it's not as glossy. But it's also not the same fingerprint magnet that it would be otherwise. And I like the way that Samsung also integrated the camera array into the back. It just feels like it integrates a little bit better than it did before. So rather than just having like a bump that just kind of like comes out of the phone, here it just feels like it kind of contours in part of it, almost like a wave kind of going into the sand. And then we got the colors. So we've got violet and pink. Now, these aren't the only colors, of course, but these are the most vibrant of the new group. And again, muted enough where it's almost like they're pastel type colors. So they are nice. They're not as, loud perhaps as other ones are. The S21 has pink almost as an exclusive. It's not available in the other sizes, including the S21 Plus. And you do get some of the muted sort of neutral colors as well, like whether it's gray, black, or white. Those are available depending on the model as well. So it's not just these. You can go for something a little bit more neutral if you want that. Now, when I flip them around, the screens are something also worth talking about because generally they're the same. So the same sizes, 6.7 inch, 6.2 inch. The sizes are the same. The panel is the same, but not the resolution. So the resolution has now been reduced to Full HD. So you get 1080p panels as opposed to the 1440p QHD Plus panels that you would have had with the S20 phones last year. Part of the reason for this was cost cutting, but also to accommodate the adaptive 120 Hz refresh rate, which is now on all the time. Well, you have to turn it on, but the point is that it's adaptive, but not one of those things that only works in certain certain apps or sort of the way it was last year, where it wasn't a feature that you could take advantage of all the time unless you reduced the resolution. In this case, it's the same thing. You're just getting it by default, basically, anyway. So those two things, it depends on how you look at it. You could not like the fact that you're getting lower resolution, but you may like the fact that you get the smoothness of 120 Hertz, which to me is actually more impactful. So these are just as smooth, frankly, as the Galaxy S21 Ultra. When it comes to navigating the interface and just moving around both of these phones, I saw no difference between that and the larger sibling that these two have. It's essentially the same thing. I'm not going to say much about performance because really, I don't know if there's a huge difference. They're using the same processor as the S21 Ultra. Between these two phones, I mean, they essentially function the same way. I didn't really see much of a performance difference either way. You do lose out on the micro SD card slot, so the 128 gigs of storage is your only starting point. If you're going to expand on that, you're going to have to go to the cloud, unfortunately, because there's no way to expand on it with a memory card. And obviously there's no headphone jack, so you're going to have to listen either wireless or use the USB-C connection to get music or audio that way as well. The main thing I want to talk about is the camera, or cameras, because there are two things that are going on here. So first is the fact that these two phones are using the same camera hardware, essentially from last year. So their equivalent S20 phones are basically the same as these when it comes to the cameras. It may look different in the back, but they're essentially the same thing. So why just go with the same and not really change anything? So Samsung's figuring, okay, well, if we change the software up enough, we can differentiate from the previous models. It's not something that's unusual. I mean, Google's been doing it for the last 2 years, so it's not an unusual premise. The only thing is that like Google, Samsung also applies software updates for camera features to older models. So whatever's in here is eventually going to be in the S20 phones as well. Now, that being said, as far as how they shoot, it really depends on what you're shooting, how you're shooting, where you are, and really what mode you're using. As I've always said about Samsung's phones and their cameras is that you have to take advantage of the features that are available. You have to learn them, and the more you learn them, the better shots you're gonna get. So Pro Mode has always been one of my favorites, and it is really good here when you make use of it. In fact, I love the fact that Samsung also added the sliders for shadows and highlights, something they probably borrowed from Google. And there's, all the other typical features as well. Live focus is gone now. It's been replaced by portrait mode. You got Pro Video. You can shoot video now in 24 frames per second as well. But I mean, as far as the image quality, the examples I'm showing you here give you an idea kind of what you can do. Some of these are photos that I did work on a little bit. Others I just left as is, just to show you kind of the variation. I think one thing you'll notice is that the colors are more muted. So in the past, of course, Samsung always favored a more saturated look for its camera output. That has been dialed back considerably, and it doesn't matter whether Scene Optimizer is on when you're using the regular photo mode either. In fact, it actually doesn't even matter if you're using Pro Mode or Night Mode or anything. Regardless of the mode, there is a reduction in terms of the color output, with one exception being food. Food always will ramp up the saturation a little bit, I guess, to make a dish look a little more enticing. As far as the new modes go, they are the same, again, more or less as the S21 Ultra. Obviously, you're not getting the 108 megapixel sensor, but you are getting things like director's view and the new single take, where single take will take multiple shots using all the different lenses, and then basically just put them all together and give you different shots and different angles. It's an interesting feature, and it's something that I think you can get creative with, but you got to really play around with it. I know Samsung tends to get very gimmicky with its camera features, and those are two that I think really require experimentation to find what you think is your wheelhouse when it comes to that. All in all, more often than not, you're just going to shoot regular video, but I do advise using Pro Video if you can. Adding 24 frames per second, I think, is a big move. It's something I wanted to see for a long time. They've added it. It makes the video look a little more cinematic, and because you can control the composition, I don't know, I just feel like you can go a lot further with that kind of video. Super slow-mo and slow-mo video is actually better this time. At least I found that it was. It seemed to be improved. Again, I didn't see a major difference as far as some of the video goes between these two and the S21 Ultra. One thing I'm going to mention about the telephoto lens here is that, yes, it does say 64 megapixels, but, well, okay, so Samsung says that there's a 3 times hybrid zoom. Yes, that's true, but it's only 1.1 optical. So it's 1.1 times optical is pretty minuscule. This is this is the same thing as it was last year. So there's no difference between these phones and last year's phones when it comes to that. So what happens is that Samsung will add a digital crop to that and essentially make it a hybrid zoom. But really, 90% of it at least is coming from the digital side. I am impressed though with the results. The output is pretty good, especially when the lighting conditions are optimal. So you can get good shots at 3 times zoom, even 5 and maybe even 10. You can even stretch it maybe to 10 times and you might get something good. The 30 times space zoom that Samsung markets, on the other hand, it's just not good. It's not, you're not going to get a very usable photo out of that. So it's not something that I would necessarily lean on to take photos of anything that I think is important. But from 3 to 5 times, you've got something. You can work on something there. 10 times, maybe. The lighting conditions have to be really good for that. Now, as always, battery life is a factor, and especially with these phones because there's no charger that comes with these phones. You get the cable, you just don't get the charger that plugs into the wall. So you will have to use something that you already have or use something else. That is a divisive move, but it's something that Samsung has done with all of the S21 phones, so certainly not just these two. The S21 Ultra also doesn't come with a charger. And but at the same time, you may not charge these two quite as often because the lower resolution on the screen is a big factor. So it's an offset, right? Like Samsung basically figured, okay, if we raise the refresh rate and we lower the resolution, we get a good balance where battery life is not going to be affected as much. It is true, and they are right about that. And it does make sense within the context of these two devices because you're not going to have a problem lasting a full day with these. I certainly didn't. I put them through their paces. I did a lot of things with them, and I never really had an issue with battery life. And one last quick note is, unlike the S21 Ultra, these two do not support the S Pen. So you will not be able to use the S Pen, at least as far as feature. Like as a stylus, you could. I mean, you could certainly like just sort of navigate the screen or just kind of type something on, or just write something on there, but you won't be able to get the S Pen interface. So the software part of the pen, so you click the button, you see the menu layout come out, like all the different integrated features that generally come with the pen would not apply here. So it's really not, if you're looking for S Pen input, if you're looking for something like that, these phones unfortunately will not provide that for you. So that is one caveat that is very distinctively different between these two and the S21 Ultra as well. And that's my review of the Galaxy S21 and the S21 Plus. For the Best Buy blog, I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.